We're really excited with your participation and look forward to these regional workshops figuring in and informing both a strategy for the achievement of the 30 by 30 target and our climate smart land strategy coming up in recent months. Really appreciate all that you do in your own lives on these important topics, and very excited to hear from you today and in coming weeks and months. Thank you.
And thank you, Secretary Crowfoot. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Amanda Hansen, Deputy Secretary for Climate Change. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate your participation. I'm Amanda Hansen, and I'm going to provide background on three things. Why Governor Newsom issued an executive order on nature-based solutions, what nature-based solutions are and why they matter, and the goals of the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, along with how it might support your environmental, economic, and equity priorities. And I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Jen Norris, who will talk about 30 by 30. Climate change and biodiversity loss are among the top 5 threats humanity will face in the next 10 years. And as we know all too well, California is not immune to these crises. Last year alone, historic wildfires burned over 4 million acres in California. Lives were lost, homes and businesses were destroyed, public health suffered from hazardous air quality, and nature we treasure is gone. These fires took place in the middle of a deadly pandemic and heat wave, and on the heels of the most extreme drought in the state's history. California is also considered one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots because of its high concentration of unique species that are also experiencing unprecedented threats, including climate change. So the governor issued the executive order in direct response to these threats and outlined a really comprehensive and results-oriented nature-based solutions agenda for California, which brings us to what are nature-based solutions and why are they important? So when we talk about nature-based solutions, we're talking about actions that work with and enhance nature to help address societal challenges. And they're important because they provide so many benefits, many of which we depend on for our well-being. This slide shows a couple of examples of nature-based solutions that address climate change and protect biodiversity, producing other benefits as well. So the circular image you see in the middle is an example of community greening, which is a suite of nature-based solutions that can cool communities facing extreme heat, reduce energy costs, allow soils to better absorb water, expand access to nature, enhance biodiversity, reduce the impacts of pollution, and increase quality of life. The top right image shows wetlands and riparian areas, which sequester carbon, reduce flood risk, filter pollution, and protect habitat. The middle right image is an example of an agricultural nature-based solution. So this hedgerow supports pollinators, improves habitat, conserves water, enhances our food supply, and contributes to our economic prosperity. The final lower right image speaks to the benefits of nature-based climate solutions in our forests. Healthy forests reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire and serve as a carbon sink. They also capture and clean our water supply, improve air quality, provide habitat for wildlife, and support local economies. So today's workshop is focused on 2 particular deliverables of the governor's nature-based solutions executive order, which Secretary Crowfoot mentioned, our Pathways to 30 by 30 document and our Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. I'm going to focus on the Climate Smart Strategy. So natural and working lands is the term that we use in California to describe the nature-based solutions sector. And it consists of the iconic landscapes that we know and love, our forests, wetlands and coasts, croplands, community green spaces, grasslands, deserts, and more. These lands cover 90% of the state's 104 million acres. Our lands offer significant opportunity to meet California's climate goals, but they've been a missing piece of our state's core climate agenda. And the Natural Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy is intended to close this gap. We are really excited to align relevant existing state efforts under one cohesive strategy and identify land management actions that can help us protect vulnerable communities, achieve carbon neutrality, improve public health and safety, and expand economic opportunity. So what does this mean for the LA region? We're here because we want to learn about nature-based solutions that are important to you and how our statewide strategy might support the LA region's environmental, economic, and equity priorities. So for example, extreme heat is already an issue in this region, and the science tells us that it will be even hotter in the future.
You awake? Baking?
I'm awake. Are you envisioning nature-based solutions playing a role to address this threat, such as green roofs or increasing community tree canopy or green streets? Sea level rise is another climate impact facing the LA region, threatening communities, critical infrastructure, and wildlife habitat. Are you envisioning nature-based solutions playing a role in reducing these risks, such as wetland restoration or stormwater parks, increased conservation? We also know that this region is facing increased wildfires and wonder, are there land management strategies you want to see more of to reduce these risks, such as increased prescribed burns, landscape scale restoration, or more land co-management with tribal partners? And finally, are there career opportunities that you'd like to see elevated to deliver climate benefits on landscapes in this region, such as certified tree trimmers and arborists, community foresters, restoration technicians, or prescribed fire burn bosses? I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Jen to talk about 30 by 30. Thank you again. We're really looking forward to hearing your input.
Thank you, Amanda. Again, I'm Jennifer Norris. I am running point on our 30 by 30 initiative. And as you've already heard, our goal is to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030. And we want to do so in a manner that protects biodiversity, combats climate change, increases access to nature, and at the same time safeguards our economic sustainability and food supply. We're being purposeful in our approach. We want to conserve places that effectively protect the biodiversity of California, our unique plants and animals. We want to conserve lands and waters that meaningfully address climate change in the ways that Amanda outlined. And we want to conserve in a way that provides equitable access to nature and its benefits, like clean water, clean air, climate resilience, and of course, recreation. So what kinds of places are we talking about? Here are some examples from the LA region. Point Dume State Marine Conservation Area, just over 30 miles due west of downtown Los Angeles, in the middle of one of the world's most popular coastal destinations, Malibu. Point Dume State Marine Conservation Area and Point Dume State Marine Reserve work in tandem to protect a variety of habitats and marine species along Malibu's coastline, including surf grass beds, kelp forests, deep rocky reefs, and submarine canyons. A great place for bird and whale watching, the Marine Conservation Area allows recreational and commercial fishing of swordfish by harpoon, as well as tribal harvest by the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. Here's the Upper Newport Bay Ecological Reserve. Among the very few remaining undeveloped wetlands on the California coast, this 753-acre property is recognized as a globally significant hotspot of biodiversity. Large mudflats provide loafing areas for migrating shorebirds and waterfowl. The sheltered waters provide foraging, spawning, and nursery habitat for commercially important marine fish, like the California halibut. Its saltwater marsh is both a water purifier and important carbon storage system. And finally, the 5,500-acre Upper Las Virgenes Canyon Open Space Preserve, adjacent to the National Park Service's Cheeseboro Canyon. This area forms a large protected habitat block immediately adjacent to the urbanized western San Fernando Valley. This site hosts a population of endangered red-legged frogs and the once thought to be extinct San Fernando Valley spine flower. It contains the headwaters of Malibu Creek and the Los Angeles River, and has miles of publicly accessible trails enjoyed daily by hikers, equestrians, and mountain bikers. Achieving 30 by 30 will rely on the protection of diverse places like these across the state. Good conservation can happen on every conceivable land type and through lots of different strategies. As the Secretary said, one size does not fit all. And at the end of the day, conservation happens locally, so we need to work together. By February 2022, we will deliver our Pathways to 30 by 30 document, which will identify opportunities and strategies to achieve 30 by 30. It will also identify challenges to meeting our goals. This document is intended to set us on the path to successful implementation of 30 by 30. Today, we want to hear from your region and hear from you about what those opportunities and challenges are. We're interested to know how you think we should go about 30 by 30. What strategies to conserve lands and waters are most effective in this region? We want to invest in successful approaches. Please tell us what those are. And at the same time, we'd like to know which strategies are more challenging and why, so we can work to address gaps. Your insights today will be used to develop our document and to help us define what does conservation mean in California. You'll be asked later to share what conservation looks like to you. The executive order called for the establishment of this collaborative approach in recognition of the fact that partners across the state have experience and expertise that we can learn from. This conversation is the beginning of what we hope is an ongoing partnership. 30 by 30 isn't a new mandate and won't be accomplished from the top down. By sharing your insights with us, we hope to learn how we can be more effective partners. Our ultimate goal is for 30 by 30 to be what is called an open source movement, for people across the state from a diverse array of sectors to commit to achieving 30 by 30 and work with us in partnership. Thank you again for being here. I really look forward to your ideas. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague, Mark Gold.
Thanks, Jen. Great to see such a good turnout this afternoon from the LA region, and also great to see three wonderful examples of incredible biodiverse places here in the region. I'm glad to be here today as we focus on some of the most pressing issues facing California's efforts to protect our natural habitats, combat climate change, and ensure biodiversity in this great state. For those of you not familiar with the Ocean Protection Council, we have a mission to ensure that California maintains healthy, resilient, and productive ocean and coastal ecosystems. The OPC works across various state agencies to coordinate activities related to ocean protection, and we also establish policies that facilitate the collection and sharing of scientific data, as well as identify policy areas that need to be addressed at the state and federal levels. State waters run from the tide lines to 3 miles out, and 16% of coastal waters are part of the statewide marine protected area network. There are 124 MPAs in this network. 9% of state coastal marine waters are protected through no-take reserves, and another 7% are limited commercial and or recreational take MPAs. The MPA network is approaching a decadal review of this program by the end of 2022. And currently we are not looking at potential MPA expansion as part of the 30 by 30 path for ocean development. The 30 by 30 path that will be developed within a year. And so that's just very important for everyone to note, is that we're not looking to expand MPAs during this next year, but there'll be discussion about MPAs and their future as part of this decadal review once that's completed. Our coastal regions and oceans are important ecosystems that are not only places where species thrive, but also serve as main attractions for California residents and visitors who want to enjoy the sand, water, and features of our coastline. These areas are also integral to our economy with aquaculture, energy generation, and the network of ports up and down the state that are essential to the movement of goods in and out of California and the entire nation. Climate change threatens the coast and ocean with rising sea levels and ocean acidification, while other coastal resources suffer from the impacts of water pollution, harmful algae blooms, and habitat loss. We must take steps now to prevent further erosion of the coast and loss of rocky intertidal habitats, wetlands, and beaches, as well as the loss of kelp forests and the loss of marine life. In order to develop the path to 30 by 30 for coastal waters, stakeholder engagement will be critical to better define what conservation means for California's coastal zone and waters. As examples, California has 34 areas of special biological significance identified, 3 national estuary programs, 3 national estuarine research reserves, and 4 national marine sanctuaries that are critical for conservation. Most of these areas have some additional conservation measures, such as oil, gas, and mineral extraction bans in marine sanctuaries, and pollution discharge limits in areas of special biological significance. We can look at these areas as potential candidates for additional conservation measures. Overall, this planning effort will enable California to develop practical and scientifically based strategies that will get us to 30 by 30 for our coastal regions and ocean waters. Thanks. And now back to Jen.
Thanks, Mark. So if you watched our January webinar, you know that we have been working with Esri on a geospatial information system called CA Nature. This system is being designed to be a publicly accessible suite of interactive mapping and visualization tools. CA Nature will bring together maps of biodiversity, climate change, and access so that we can view and analyze different features of the landscape in one place. It will allow us to identify places across California where we have the opportunity to achieve our biodiversity, climate, and equity goals. We will use CA Nature to assess what percentage of California is already conserved and track progress toward our goal. We are currently developing CA Nature using authoritative statewide data that we currently use or have access to. Of course, this is only the first version. We expect to expand this system over time, integrating new data that reflects our changes in understanding and knowledge. Some of you have been asking how you can provide your data for use in CA Nature. I'm happy to tell you there is now a submission form on our website where you can provide information about the data you want us to consider for future versions. We're most interested in statewide information that meets our program objectives and meets strong scientific, data, and documentation standards. So stay tuned for future updates on CA Nature. It's going to be pretty cool. And now I'll turn it back over to the facilitators. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen, and hello, everyone. As you have heard from Amanda, Jen, and Mark, the state has been busy since Governor Newsom issued the executive order. So for a couple of moments, let's zoom out and look at where we've been and then where we're going next. Since Governor Newsom issued the executive order last October, the California Natural Resources Agency and its partner agencies have made some important progress in developing these strategies. In January, a kickoff webinar was hosted by the state that drew in over 800 interested parties. CRNA then began a formal consultation process with the California Native American tribes, and that process is continuing and tribal listening sessions are being hosted. CNRA has also been engaging with interested parties and stakeholders from around the state to hear perspectives and insights related to these efforts. And in April, the website was launched to serve as a portal to learn and engage in developing the Pathways to 30 by 30 document and the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy document. Another recent step was the release of the public input questionnaire to gather experiences and ideas from a broad section of Californians. And then today is the 7th of 9 regional workshops to gain input and perspectives. So now let's look ahead. This summer, CNRA will convene several topical advisory panels to address key questions. Each advisory panel will produce a summary document that gives context to their topic area, offers technical or other insights, and then provides some key recommendations. Topics will include issues related to climate change, biodiversity, defining conservation, and equitable approaches to this work. The panel will also present their recommendations in virtual workshops. The input and the information that we are gathering will be used in the drafting of the Climate Smart Lands Strategy document, which will be released in draft form for public review and input this summer. This important document will then be finalized and delivered in October as the project team then begins the next phase of this effort. Throughout the fall, we'll host another series of virtual engagements to update the public on our progress and invite more participation. And then we'll also be drafting and releasing the other key strategy document, the Pathways to 30 by 30 document, for public review and comment. This strategy document will be finalized and delivered in February of 2022. As I mentioned a couple moments ago, to support this effort, the new website is launched. It's www.californianature.ca.gov, and it serves as a portal for information about advancing 30 by 30 and the climate smart lands planning processes. This new website features information about the executive order, how nature-based solutions work, ways to get involved through regional workshops and other events, as well as a place to share your insights. And importantly, the interactive public input questionnaire is designed to solicit input that can be used in developing these two main strategy documents and will guide the work that we must do as a state. Responses to the questionnaire that's posted right now are welcomed until May 14th. So that's a key date to remember. And we want you to stay in touch. So please contact us, ask questions, provide your experiences and your ideas using these multiple platforms. And now over to Jenna Tourget for exploring the region segment of this workshop.
All right, thank you, Joan. Now we're moving on to the portion of today's workshop that focuses in on perspectives in the Los Angeles region and provides an opportunity for the public to participate in the process. Again, we're focused on the Los Angeles region, and for our purposes, this region consists of Ventura, Los Angeles, and Orange counties, and the western extents of San Bernardino and Riverside counties. Around 17.6 million people call the LA region home, making it the most populous region in the state. The city of Los Angeles is also the second largest in the United States. The Los Angeles region includes a wealth of historical and cultural resources, in addition to popular beaches along the coastline and hiking and skiing in the San Gabriel Mountains. Tourism in the Los Angeles region accounts for around $22 billion in revenue, which is the highest in the state. As you probably know, the Los Angeles region is rich in both natural and agricultural lands. The region's land cover is predominantly shrublands and developed areas, together accounting for about 2/3 of the total area. There are also significant areas of trees, forests, grasslands, and cropland. Most of the region's lands, around 64%, are privately owned, while the U.S. Forest Service manages 29%, with various federal, state, and local agencies making up the remainder. We wanted to provide this regional snapshot before we dive further into our meeting, and your perspective will be important as we move to the next section where we engage with you and gather your input on a series of questions that will be used in developing strategies. So, to get your experiences and ideas, we'll be using a software called Poll Everywhere, and there are 3 ways to participate. The first is on your computer browser, and a browser is Chrome, Explorer, Edge, Firefox, or whatever you have on your computer to access the internet. On your browser, you can participate by opening a browser, going to, if you can go back a slide here, going to www.polleverywhere.com pollev.com/kwpoll1. The link to that is in the chat box as well. You can also go on your smartphone by opening a browser window, www.pollev.com/kwpoll1, or you can participate using a text message. You can send a text to the number 22333 and include in the message KWPoll1. That's KWPOLL with the number 1 at the end to the number 22333. And again, that information is in the chat. It's also on the screen. Our facilitators will let you know when to use your preferred option throughout the meeting to respond to questions. And again, we're asking questions and want to know what you think. This Poll Everywhere tool allows us to save your answers and help inform the direction of the initiative. Before we go to the next slide, the next slide will be the first question. There will be a word cloud there. If you have an answer that is 2 words, you'll put an underscore between those 2 words. So if your answer is Los Angeles, you can write Los and then the underscore and then the word Angeles. So that allows us to see the 2 words together in the word cloud. So I'm going to have us move on to the first question. And the first question is, where are you located? Where are you located? So I see folks are on the webinar from Los Angeles. I also see San Diego, San Bernardino, East Hollywood, Long Beach, Newport Beach, folks from Santa Barbara, San Bernardino, Rancho Santa Margarita, Altadena. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of people calling in and joining us on this webinar today are from Los Angeles. Take another 5 seconds on this slide here. You can see more answers coming in. And we will take us to the next question. And question 2, if you're on your browser window, you can refresh your browser window so you could see this answer coming through here. The question is, what sector do you represent? What sector do you represent? A is government, federal, state, and local. B, tribal government or tribal community. C is business, investor, labor. D is NGO, non-government organization, community-based organization. E is academic. F is general public. You can see the responses live here on the screen. You see we have a little over a half of people who've responded to the poll are here from non-government community-based organizations. We also have folks responding who are government, federal, state, and local. We have folks calling in and joining us from the general public, from academic, business, investor, and labor. Well, thank you all so much for participating in this question. We have one more in this main plenary session here. I'm going to take about 5 seconds, and we'll move on to the next slide. All right, next slide is, when you think about nature or special places in the region, what comes to mind? Remember to use the underscore if there are more than one, if there's more than one word in your response. So I see the Santa Monica Mountains, beaches, the Channel Islands, wetlands, the Etiwanda Falls, the San Gabriel Mountains, Point Dume, it's going to start getting smaller as more answers are on the screen here to accommodate. I see the desert, but even in this small view here, I see wetlands, the mountains, the Channel Islands, the beaches, our coastal areas, Griffith Park. Wonderful, and a lot of other, I think, probably special places to people here as well. All right, I'll take another 5 seconds and watch this on the slide here. and we will move on. I wanted to thank everyone for your participation in the plenary session of this meeting. A key goal of this meeting is to further invite your input and to help inform the development of the Natural Lands Climate Smart Strategy and the 30 by 30 Pathways document. And since we have such a large number of participants, we will now transition into breakout groups so that your participation and input can be most effectively captured. In the breakout session, we will be asking you to provide your experiences and ideas on 3 areas regarding regional interests and current efforts, regional challenges, and regional opportunities. Participants who requested interpretation upon registration will remain in this room here. And because you will be staying here, you will not get a prompt to join a breakout room. Other webinar participants will be randomly assigned to Breakout Room 1, Breakout Room 2, and a large group of you will remain here in this main breakout room here with me. We will be captioning your input in the 2 breakout rooms and this room, similar to how we've done in the plenary session. And we recognize that the questions we'll be asking are high level, and we're asking for participants to share very brief responses. We're hoping to get to common themes from the responses, and the intent is to provide an opportunity for everyone on the webinar to see and reflect on other people's responses. And following the workshops, the facilitation team will compile all of the responses to all of the questions and prepare a meeting summary containing a synthesis of common themes. So all responses will be treated equally and will be included in the meeting summary appendices. Remember too that there is a public input questionnaire that's running parallel to the regional workshops. This questionnaire is intended to provide interested communities and members of the public with a more detailed opportunity to provide targeted input to inform the development of the 30 by 30 Pathways document and the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy. Since we have some phone participants here with us today, you might not be able to provide input via computer browser. We'll accommodate you in this main room as well, so you will not receive a prompt to join a breakout room. So we encourage all other participants, if you receive a notification on your screen asking you to go to a breakout room, to go to that breakout room. Again, some of you won't, and you'll stay here with me. So we'll get that process started. I'll wait for everyone to break, and we thank you for your patience in the next few minutes as we transition into the breakout rooms.
Are you in the main room, Jenna?
All right.
With me?
I'm in the main room with you. I see Joan is in this room and needs to be moved to the other. So we'll get our team. I'll get our team to move you over, Joan.
There we go. All right. See y'all later.
Bye, Joan.
See you all. Jen, I'm glad to be in this main room with you today. And I thank everyone for your patience as we went into our respective breakout rooms for the interactive portion of today's meeting. So in this room, we're also welcoming phone-only participants and non-English speaking participants. And as a reminder, we are still recording this session and streaming live on YouTube for others to be able to view at a later time. And also, our interpretation services are still available. Again, if you joined late to this room, please look for interpretation instructions in the chat. It will be entered there shortly. So again, my name is Jenna Tourget, and I'm your facilitator during the session. We have a lot of information to give you up front since we are making sure to accommodate phone calling users as well as non-English users as well. And so I'm going to have a bit of a monologue up front. I just ask for your patience and we'll get right into the questions. So at any time, if you are encountering any technical difficulties, you can enter it in the chat. You can also call or text the number 619-890-5955. And we recognize that if you're calling in by phone, you might not have the option of participating by computer. And we've designed this room to collect your input verbally or by text as well. That said, we do encourage you to provide text responses if you are reasonably able to do so, and if it's not a financial burden. Text responses allow us to more accurately capture your input, so we would encourage that as well. So I'm going to give a couple options for how to participate in this meeting. For phone call-in users only, if you're only on your phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9, and that will let me know that you have a question. So *9 lets me know you have a question or you have a response to the question that we have. I'll unmute you, you'll push *6, and then we'll remute you after your response. We also have, I don't think we have too many phone callers on, but I'll facilitate how long we're doing for phone call-in users to get everyone's input as well. And again, if you don't have the option to share your responses orally or in text today, if you're a phone-only call-in user, as well as anyone else who is on today, you can also use the public input questionnaire at californianature.ca.gov. All right. So the breakout sessions will be organized around 3 main themes: regional interests and current efforts, challenges and opportunities. And as you can see on the screen, we'll be using a new link to Poll Everywhere. So the new link, I would encourage you to close out your browser window if you used your browser to answer KW Poll 1 before. Just close that out and enter the new link, which is www.pollev.com/KW-Poll2. You can do that on your browser or your phone. And then you can also text 22333, the word KW Poll 2. So that's KWPOLL2. And if you already have a text message chain open, you can keep that text message chain open and just add KW Poll 2 to that, and it will invite you to this new section here. So the information is in the chat. It's also on the slides. It'll be on the top of every slide. So we'll get into the first question here. Actually, Ali, before you move on to the next slide, I do want to say you don't need to do the underscore on this slide. On these questions, you can type your responses in. We do ask for you to keep it succinct. You'll see we'll have the answers scrolling on the screen. And if it's one sentence or one phrase or less, it's a lot easier for us to see it going. So I'd say you could write your responses in several lines, and that lets us, in several answers, and that lets us read them more efficiently. Your other participants can see what you wrote as well. So you can write more than one response. It's just a little easier if you break it up. You can also, if you have a really long response you want to add, or just more thoughts that you want to give us as well, the public input questionnaire is a great option, an alternative. And even if you don't hear me read the response on the screen or see it on the screen, everything you send to KW to our poll is recorded. And so we have it on the back end. It's all taken care of. And so we just want to let you know we have that captured. So let's move on to our first question. Finally, again, we're in regional interests and current efforts. Regional interests and current efforts. So our first question is thinking about biodiversity in the region. Which species, habitats, or places are important to protect? So I see native grasslands, wildflower fields, Tres Hermanos, Toner Canyon area owned by City of Industry, the Shell area property, the LA Urban Wildlife Corridor, the California Leased Turn. And I see we have a call-in user. So if your phone number ends in 7056, I'm going to unmute you for an answer to this question. So I will unmute you here, and you'll have to push *6 on your end. 7056, you're unmuted.
Thank you. So I want to get across the concept of biological corridors, which are often at higher elevations. The most obvious east-west biological corridors in the state are at the north end of the Sacramento Valley and the south end of the San Joaquin Valley, and note species in both need to cross Interstate 5. In Southern California, there needs to be links between the transverse ranges, and there needs to be a link between inland transverse ranges and the north-south Santa Ana Mountains. There was work done, especially around 15 years ago, on the South Coast Wildlands Project and Missing Linkages Project. Go to scwildlands.org, and you can click on things like Wildlands of Santa Clara River Watershed or proposed reserve design for Cajon Ranch, and also the Los Padres National Forest. The Forest Service is out of control, targeting major logging at Mount Pinos and Reyes Peak in Ventura, and Mount Pinos is also in Kern County and quite close to LA County. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And for any other phone call-in users, if you have an answer to thinking about biodiversity in the region, what species, habitats, places are important to protect. There were so many that came through as well. I took a couple notes and I've seen them come up a few times. The San Gabriel Mountains, the forest, dunes, Ormond Beach and Oxnard, Chaparral. And as we're coming through here, the San Fernando Valley spine flower. I know wetlands is an area that is an answer we've seen a couple times. Nevin's berries, coastal sage scrub habitat, brown pelicans, connections between conserved areas, the coastal dune habitat, seeing some wildlife very specific to the region, and we appreciate your responses here on biodiversity, especially in this region. Mountain lions, black and white abalone, bears. All right, we'll take another minute on this question before we move on to the next. All right, all species above and below ground, the LA River, the Arroyo Seco watershed and headwaters of Arroyo Seco. Okay, wonderful. Desert bighorn sheep, the Mojave ground squirrel, Camp Pendleton, the Arroyo toad, the challenge, which might be groundwater contamination. The Mojave Desert is thinking about biodiversity in the region as a place important to protect. Walnut woodlands, raptors. Upper Newport Bay. And desert habitats. Wonderful. So looking at timing, I'm going to move us on to our next question here, which is question 2. So thinking about this region, what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? So what nature-based solutions are important to you? So Amanda mentioned some examples in her remarks, including community greening, wetland restoration, climate-smart agricultural innovations. So I see here restoration of native vegetation, urban greenery, slowing development, rewilding degraded fragmented native landscapes, reconnecting creeks to floodplains, carbon sequestration on habitat land, infiltration into local aquifers, urban land acquisition, greening in most park poor LA neighborhoods. I'm seeing green infrastructure a couple times come through too. So what nature-based climate solutions are important to you? Protecting wildlife corridors so species and processes can move. Promoting education and adoption of soil health principles. Recreating our riparian habitats, local gardens and greening. Fish hatchery. Stop government pruning, no trimming, no tree removal. Permanent land protection. Hardening recreation infrastructure. Stopping habitat fragmentation to protect large intact species. Trees and bioswales. And again, if you are a phone call-in user, you can dial *9 to let us know your response as well. That's *9 on your phone. It'll raise your hand. Seeing some great rich responses coming through. Reduction of fossil fuel vehicle travel. River restoration on the LA River creeks and streams. Wildlife corridor creation and preservation. So I'm seeing responses about infrastructure, about preservation, about connectivity. Keeping plants and trees instead of removing and putting down asphalt and cement. Restoration of kelp and other blue carbon solutions. Local community farming, dune restoration, restoration of native species, coastal wetland restoration. And if you've just joined us, we are using we're using a tool called Poll Everywhere. You can go to www.pollev.com/kwpoll2. We'll add that information to the chat as well. You can also text 22333, the word KW Poll 2. So networks of marine protected areas, smaller housing footprints, and turning unused land and lawns into food forests, communal fruit trees, urban foraging. Creating nearby nature in cities. So we've seen a couple of responses of connecting people to nature, and then also how to bring those nature-based solutions into urban areas. Carbon ranching and landscape ranching, stop fracking in oil and gas extraction. Creek daylighting, natural systems, fish passage projects. Coastal fish nurseries. Such great responses coming through. Thank you so much, everyone, for responding through Poll Everywhere. And if you're having any technical issues, definitely reach out through chat. And you can also dial the number in the chat as well if you're having any technical issues. Sediment transport in rivers to the beach. And we're going to take another minute or so on this question. What nature-based climate solutions are important to you? Looking at California native trees, reestablishing wildflower fields and native chaparral. Looking at sea level rise adaptation, limiting coastal armoring. No prescribed burns and restoring linkages between fragmented habitats. Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to have us move on to our next question. And the next question is thinking about equity and opportunity. So it's with regard to 30 by 30 or nature-based solutions. How can we advance equity and opportunity in the region? So we want to hear your views on advancing equitable access to nature and recreation in the Los Angeles region. So as we wait for this to load, I want to remind our phone call-in users, you can press *9. If you've joined us late, interpretation in the chat at the bottom of the screen is available as well. Include urban accessible sites as part of the 30. Reach into communities where they are and change the definition of access to include all residents. So the definition of access is a theme. Native, oh, that one went by a little too fast for me here. Give under-resourced communities enough power and resources to create and implement their own solutions. Tribal engagement and project interpretation. Looking at LA County Parks assessment to identify communities that lack access to parks. Offering scholarships to local colleges and universities for students of color. Creating urban parks. See responses here about funding. Looking at close to home recreation resources. Seeing some responses about housing, affordable housing, and rent control. Neighborhood parks to be made wild so the community gets more access to nature. Buy, rent, retreat from sea level rise. Looking at lowering costs. Transit to trails. Centering Indigenous voices. And engaging all stakeholders. Looking at the relationship between development and nature. And again, the question is on how we're advancing equity and opportunity in the region. Designing, managing parks that reflect the needs and values of the community. Prioritizing disadvantaged communities for workforce development. We're seeing some economic responses as well. Bringing people to urban parks like Griffith Park, in the Verdugo Mountains. We'll take another 2 minutes on this question here. As you're thinking, as you're seeing things come across the screen or hearing me read them out, if there's anything that comes to mind you'd like to build upon as well or deepen. Creating urban jobs for nature and biodiversity protection in every community. Career and workforce development within underserved communities. Funding for restoration and transportation. We saw a note on developing maps and lists for LA natural areas. Creating connectivity between parks and city that people can access and travel safely. Public transportation. I'm looking at access in terms of proximity and also access in terms of funding, transportation options, creating opportunities for youth and jobs, engaging students, elementary and middle school in the importance of conservation. Effective marine protected area networks allow for better access to ocean resources. Recognizing tribal sovereignty and empowering tribal land stewardship. Removing lawns from urban areas. And developing urban bus transit routes to natural forest trailheads. All right, and for our phone-only call-in users, you can dial *9 on your phone for our call-in users only. And if you're having issues with Poll Everywhere, definitely feel free to chat myself or Allison Skurlock, and we'll help you get that set up if you want to make sure your answer gets in as well. So if your hand is raised, we're calling on phone call-in users only, but we definitely want to hear your input. There's Poll Everywhere, and we'll help you set that up through chat as well. So I'm seeing here provide opportunities for all underserved youth to have experiences in state and natural parks. Creating travel opportunities for residents to visit the Channel Islands. Give power and resource to communities to create their own solutions. Stop funding road expansions, fund active transportation. And create affordable housing for people who wish to live in communities next to public lands. Let's take another minute or so here. I know there's so many rich responses coming through and we want to make sure we capture them all. But also if you sent yours in and I haven't seen it or read it here, it's definitely on the back end. This just goes slow for me to be able to read it and for us to view as well. So we're just getting a portion of them here.
So many great responses, huh, Jenna? I'm impressed.
I am
really
as well,
stuff.
and they're very specific to the area,
Yes.
and so I'm appreciative.
Exactly, very much what we were hoping for. Good job,
Yes.
room 2. What room are we in? Room 1. Main room.
The main room. That's
Good
right.
job, main room.
So let's move us on to the next question here, just to make sure we get the timing in well. So our next question is, what is working in the region to conserve lands and or coastal waters and implement nature-based solutions to climate change? This is a packed question. So we want to hear success stories and existing strategies, programs, projects, and initiatives that you think are working well. If there's specific goals and targets, so both conserving lands, coastal waters, and implementing nature-based solutions and thinking about it in the context of climate change. So I saw the Catalina Conservancy, conservation easements, strong partnerships between local governments, nonprofits, state agencies, NCCPs, private organizations supporting private-public partnerships, land trusts, strong collaboratives, and seeing collaboration come up as something that is successful. The Catalina Island Conservancy, again, coming through. The Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and partnerships with local NGOs. Education by local nonprofits. And it looks like we have a call-in user, I think the same call-in user as before. And so the response is, what is working in the region to conserve land? So I'll unmute you here. What is working in the region to conserve lands and our coastal waters? So 7056, you should be unmuted.
Yeah. Someone mentioned they like to end CCPs. Anyway, the words sound fine, but I've worked a lot on habitat conservation plans. Like there's consultation to allow killing of the species, take of the species, meaning killing, injury, or harassment. And so anyway, some of these good sounding things, like it says conservation plan sounds good, except habitat conservation plans often involve killing the endangered species you're supposed to be protecting. So watch those words. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'll mute you now. And I've seen a couple, and just to let you know, we are taking down notes on verbal comments as well. I saw quite a few notes come in as what is working in the region. I saw the Huntington Beach wetland solutions, healthy soils programs, outward bound adventures, a couple notes for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, Measure A in LA County to fund parks based on a needs assessment. The idea of steelhead in the LA River now taken seriously. Habitat conservation plans. Hashtag and social media initiatives to spread good practices. Education for the public, wetland restoration. So organizations noted here. Thinking about the difficulty of advocating for natural lands with special interest money as well. It might be a challenge, and as you can guess, we'll have a question on challenges. The Bolsa Chica Conservancy, the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument. So these are success stories, programs, initiatives. If there's any targets or goals that you see as successful related to these initiatives, programs, policies, partnerships. Restoration efforts by Orange County Parks. MLPA protected areas, our national forests, our state parks. The work that local activists are doing to push government and NGOs. All right, I'm going to give us another minute here as folks finalize some of their responses to what is a success story and what is working in the area. Outreach to local tribes, the Nature for All Leadership Academy, fish management plans, Ormond Beach Restoration and Public Access Plan, South Coast Missing Linkages Report, the Naval Base taking care of some of Magoo Lagoon, marine protected areas. It might be a challenge as well, so we invite you for the next question to provide input on challenges too. Coastal wetlands restoration, and California State Conservancies under the CNRA. Okay, so I'll have us move on to the next question here. And our next question is, what is working in the region to increase equitable access to nature? So equitable access to nature and its benefits. Again, if you're a phone call-in user, *9. What is working to increase equitable access to nature? I see Baldwin Park Scenic Overlook State Park and public programs. So again, we're looking for success stories, especially relating to existing strategies, programs, projects, initiatives to increase equitable access to nature and its benefits. I've seen Ormond Beach as a theme come up multiple times here. Local educational groups increasing access to and interpretation of nature. Local educational groups. And I just want to remind folks, it's going slow so we can read it, but everything you type in is being captured behind the scenes. But since we have a couple hundred people on the call, we'd have thousands of responses to read through. So we want to make sure we're seeing a good group of them, and so we're reading through them. But everything is captured behind the scenes. So the Santa River Restoration and Access Projects for communities like Santa Paula, public transportation to parks and parkways, funding of transit to trail studies and programs, UCLA's Biodiversity Atlas of LA County, mobile apps that make finding trails and natural areas easier and more enjoyable. Providing technical assistance is working in this region to increase equitable access to nature and its benefits. The Audubon surveying bird areas for accessibility, nature interpretation services, park planning processes that are inclusive, awareness, the visibility of people of color in conservation, the Laguna Ocean Foundations for OC communities, fishing clubs, the USC Sea Grant education program. So again, as we're seeing responses come in here, if you're a phone call-in user, you can press *9 on your phone as well. Public-private collaborations, grants for urban youth to visit and buy camping gear, learn about nature and how to care for it, local conservation corps programs, Kellogg Park on Ventura Avenue on the west side. So these are what's working to increase equitable access to nature. I see coastal commissions and organizations that increase access. Environmental justice organizations like CAUSE. Outings led by the Irvine Ranch Conservancy. Looking at more diverse imagery and storytelling that's inclusive. Workforce development programs that lead youth into conservation and science-based jobs. Senior citizen birdwatching tours. I've seen quite a few organizations called out, quite a few locations called out, initiatives, programs. I want to thank everyone for calling out these what's working in these success stories in the region. Pocket parks in downtown Los Angeles. LA County has a great trails website. The US EPA one-time funded LA River Stewards Program, the Conservation Corps. I'll give us another minute on this answer here. Community science, defunding police, amplifying voices that support responsible recreation on our public lands. Seen the Conservation Corps come through a couple times here. Jen, how do we say this word? Chloropyrifos?
Or pyrifos. It's a hard one.
Pyrifos. Thank you. Well, the request was banning it, not encouraging it.
That's right.
Opening access to landlocked public lands, like the Bureau of Land Management. All right, we'll take a couple more on this one here. And again, everything you've typed in and everything you've texted in is working on the back end. You might see it slowly coming through here, but we're capturing all your input and it's treated equally in the summary as well. School greening, multilingual friendly park rangers versus law enforcement. Okay, well, I will move us on to our next question here. And our next question is the state of California is committed to conserving 30% of its lands and coastal waters by 2030. What does conservation mean to you? And if you are on your browser or on your phone, if you refresh the screen, you might need to refresh it for this question to pop up. And as we go from question to question, if you refresh your browser. So again, the state has not yet defined conservation in this context and is interested in what you think. So what does conservation mean to you? So I see sustainable use of the resource, so sustainable use. Protecting all mapped important plant areas. In the long run, conservation is life. Acquiring new open space and preserving already dedicated open space. So we have our phone call-in user. The question is, what does conservation mean to you? I'll unmute you here. And I'll be taking notes on other things that are coming through as well. So 7056, you are unmuted.
Thank you.
And you're unmuted. What does conservation mean to you?
Oh, yeah. I didn't really want to define it, but I wanted to point people to the wildernesswatch.org website, and they have strict definitions of wilderness and things, and you might look toward that for one good definition of it. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful, thank you. So a definition for what does conservation mean to you. Thank you for that. I'm seeing parks might be prioritized over housing, protection of natural resources, no extraction of any resource, that any area is actively managed to increase, restore biodiversity, the restoration of native plant communities on currently disturbed areas. And if you've just joined us, we added in the chat where you can find this poll, pollev.com, pollev.com/kwpoll2. You can also text in your responses. Conservation means saving our natural and open spaces. Ensuring existing biodiversity is represented in conserved lands. Prioritizing climate adaptation and ecosystem services. Preventing new development in high fire areas. And then with new developments requiring some natural and open space development or preservation. What conservation means to you is maintaining, daylighting, and enhancing wetlands and river waterways. Investing in rehabilitation as much as preserving. And for our phone call-in user, we're gonna get through this question here, and as we have time at the end of the question, I'll call on you again for our next question. So protecting current coastal habitat areas and habitat areas of the future. I'm seeing conservation meaning creating consistency and coordination across conservation efforts. Sustainable land management practices in many sectors. Preserving land in as natural as a state as possible. Conservation meaning water sequestration. The permanent protection of federally designated critical habitats. Protection of rare habitats like our coastal habitats. Stopping urban sprawl. Addressing multiple issues like climate change. Planting appropriate California natives everywhere possible. Investing in restoration. Creating ordinances at the local and municipal levels to protect existing green spaces. A recognition that human society is intertwined with nature in complex ways. Protecting land from development, restoring natural processes, conserving people's quality of life by better design to include nature everywhere. Seeing conservation as restoration of all habitats and especially riparian habitats. Planting native species instead of invasive non-native species. Balancing human and non-human populations. Prohibited commercial and residential development and dedicated land management. And limiting single-use plastic and preventing trash from ending up in our open spaces. Seeing some great themes come across here too. Connecting wildlife corridors, more agriculture in urban Los Angeles, preventing habitat conversion to development. So I'm seeing some themes of conservation as protecting, as not developing, as restoring. People live within the means of nature as stewards and beneficiaries for a high quality of life. That LA's mountain lions thrive with more land corridors instead of on freeways. Protecting biodiversity. That front and backyards can be conserved areas. That we protect significantly ecological sensitive lands. Okay. So we're ready to move on soon. So I'm going to move us to our next question. And I just want to remind folks, if I haven't read your answer, if you haven't seen it on the screen, it's still captured as part of our poll everywhere and will be included in our summary and throughout the process here. So our next segment is on challenges. So again, our next section is on challenges. So our first question is, describe the greatest challenges to conserving lands and or coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. The greatest challenges to conserving lands or coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions to climate change. Funding, funding, funding. Lack of operations and maintenance funds here.
Tell us what kind of
All of
funding.
our
It's
first
helpful.
responses. Yes, thank you, Jen. What type of funding is a
Funding
challenge?
for what? Yeah. What do you want to see it used for?
That's great. And I'll unmute our call-in user here.
Helpful.
If you have a response to challenges. And 1750, you are again unmuted.
Hi, and thanks so much. So I think my browser refreshes slowly, but the answer that I was going to give for the last question is pretty much the same. Just having the acceptance that not all the areas that we want to keep natural and wild are serviceable by AAA roadside service.
Okay. Not all areas are serviceable by AAA services. Thank you so much. So I see Jen asked for specific funding. I see funding for program education and transportation initiatives. Other challenges are warming oceans and problems with kelp, CDT on the seafloor of Los Angeles, special interests. Property size and lot size of public lands are not significant enough to promote ecosystems. The challenge is support for science. And again, some of the more specific specific responses are helpful, and also shorter responses too. Just to read them on the screen. Again, you can go to the website for longer responses too. Overconsumption of natural resources, self-capacity and training, especially local governments. Restoring linkages between protected areas. Lack of funding for land acquisition. That question on funding, lack of funding for land acquisition. Engaging all stakeholders in a transparent manner using best available science. Banning the sale and use of pollutants. Investment in people to work as stewards of the land. Access requires intensive stewardship here. So these are challenges to conserving lands and coastal waters. Ensuring prioritization of equity in decision-making and implementation. Human population pressure, the challenge to implementing, to conserving lands and coastal waters and implementing nature-based solutions. Urban sprawl, private ownership of large amounts of land. Funding for staff salaries, profit over protection of biodiversity. The challenge is pesticide exposure to farm workers, human population pressures, and political will. We've seen those come in a couple times here. The challenge is creating a shared understanding of and a love for natural lands. Explaining individual responsibility. The challenge of CEQA. Private landowners, development pressure. And if you're just joining us here, the link to this poll everywhere is at the top of the screen. It's pollev.com/KWpoll2. You can also type in your response to 22333 KWpoll2. Funding for education on the natural world, an answer to specifics for the lack of funding. The need for stronger state regulation. Lack of equitable policies that limit the use of water and oil products and gas. Grant admin caps and administrative funding. Competing goals of different government agencies. Ensuring that residents have a say in the process. How land use plans are developed in consideration of habitat. reducing alternating patterns of consumption, especially contaminating plastics and chemicals. About who makes decisions and who has influence. The loss of working lands is a challenge. Resistance to manage retreat and long-term planning. Do another minute or so on this question and we'll get on to the next. Fully funding the CDFW so they can hold local government entities accountable. Herbicide and pesticide use. Another note on CEQA, the amount of paving in the area, in the region. Education on pesticides in gardening. Preventing entry of and not just taking care of invasive species. Consensus about conserving land and coastal waters. I'm seeing so many rich responses come through. Thank you all for your response here. Such important responses. Thank you. I'm gonna have us go on to the next question here. And just to let you know, if you typed it in, we're still receiving it. And if you do have more you'd like to add, there's the public input questionnaire on the website as well. So this next question is related to challenges as well, and it's the challenge to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. So we talked about equity before, and we want to know now what are some of the challenges to increasing equitable access to nature and its benefits. So I'm seeing transportation, income, rent control, and protectors of renters, political interests, fossil fuel pollution and burdens on communities, inequitable distribution of nature and open space, displacement, bringing nature to people in urban settings, especially as a challenge, education access depends on desire to access nature, funding for local programs, community access, interpretation, saving natural open spaces next to cities. So we've talked to access in terms of transportation as well as whether nature is located in urban areas. The cost of housing near to nature, NIMBYism, park poor Los Angeles area, the lack of park space in Black and brown neighborhoods, the blocking of public spaces by those who are closest to nature, freeway splitting off from residential areas, outreach and education, thinking about focusing on remote areas versus natural areas closer to urban areas. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color representation in land management. Inclusive site design, transportation and presence of relatively nearby communities. And if you've just joined us, you can go to www.pollev.com/KWPoll2 and you can text the number 22333 to KWPoll2. Landscape design for network of nature and animals that permeates all neighborhoods. A challenge is authentically inviting people from all communities to participate in outdoor recreation. Trails that are closed or limited access because nearby neighborhoods do not like parking there. We've seen transportation, some parking issues as an equity issue. Safety and access, education, local political will to guide investments in under-resourced communities, lack of natural areas and park spaces in impoverished areas, transportation solutions that access nature, All right, let's take another 2 minutes on this answer here. Having land available for creating natural areas in urban areas. From equitable standpoint, looking at housing development in suburban areas and urban areas. We don't tell stories of communities of color and land protection. The challenge of homelessness and the housing crisis. Outdated zoning codes. The understanding of the value of natural areas. Programs in public schools, the lack of programs in public schools. Redefining nature for all as not a place to travel far away to. A funding bias against urban areas. Looking at who communicates about issues related to nature and who has political will. Protecting watersheds and riparian corridors. All right, I'm going to move us on to our next question. And just to let you know, if you provided the response, we have it. We're going to move on to the next question here. And this question is about opportunities. So what does long-term success look like for nature-based solutions, nature-based climate solutions in the region? So I want you to think really big picture here. So big picture, what does long-term success look like? So this is a future-oriented question. We're thinking high-level regional outcomes as well as local-level project outcomes. And we welcome you again to think big. How can these nature-based solutions deliver broad policy goals? So long-term success looks like no more fracking and oil and gas drilling, migration space for coastal habitats, so even with sea level rise, coastal habitats can thrive. Not relying on imported water, establishing climate metrics, saving natural open spaces because once lost, they are lost forever. Success looks like a massive public education campaign to change consumption habits, barriers to kelp farmers from too many permits, long-term success looking like electric public transit, restoration of the Bologna wetlands, protection and restoration of landscape scale habitat linkages. All Californians knowing names of animals and plants, not just in English, but in Spanish and in indigenous languages as well. That every neighborhood has access to open spaces in a semi-natural state. That we make natural open space available to all. That solar energy is widespread. See a note on Olmsted's Emerald Necklace for LA. For urban LA County, saving every last remaining piece of land from development. Improving public health, so big picture success for nature-based climate solutions, the end of sprawl, that there's no more urban heat island. And for our phone call-in user, I'll unmute you here. You have a response to what does long-term success look like? I'll unmute you now.
Thank you. I just want to mention the proposal for restoring Biono wetlands is misguided and is not actual restoration. There are some ways without using heavy equipment and herbicides where it can get a lot better, but what's being billed as restoration is not actual restoration. Thanks.
Okay, and as a reminder for folks, we are We're grateful for your responses to these questions, and all responses will be cataloged equally through the summary process as well. So most areas are conserved without needing to be specially protected. Embracing and implementing policies that embrace the environment. I saw a couple names of philosophers, naturalists like Thoreau and Muir, and their ideas being implemented, that nature-based climate solutions become an integral part of all decision-making processes. That we breathe clean air, drink clean water. There's a protection and restoration of existing open spaces. There's an interest in Latinx young people in organic farming for local markets. That South Coast looks verdant, cars are scarce. There's wider public beaches in 2,200. Recognition that there are no invasive species, but all plants and animals have merit. Where urban residents are actively participating in education and action. Long-term success looking like coastal resiliency, more wetland areas, that every public school becomes a greened campus. Local with solar, protecting publicly owned desert lands. We're integrating indigenous frameworks into education. Looking at healthy communities and health outcomes. It's easy to get employed in work that brings nature back to our neighborhoods. Projects are carbon neutral and are net neutral. That the Channel Islands is a wild destination. Closing of military bases. There's an effort for planned retreat from sea level rise to Ventura Fairgrounds. More coastal wetlands as a success. All right, I'm going to move us on to our last question. Our last question of the afternoon/evening is, what does success look like for 30 by 30? What does success look like for 30 by 30? So thinking ahead, we're in 2030. What do you hope has happened in this region? It can be high level, regional, it can be project specific, but what does success look like for 30 by 30? That this is not just a passing initiative. Seems like good success for me if that's the only response we get. More diversity of the people who work in and for the environment. Going beyond to 50 by 50. People in the city are closer to high quality natural experiences. Restored Bologna wetlands. That agencies reform to focus on conservation. That both urban and remote areas are conserved. So what does success look like for 30 by 30? That tribal leaders are managing expanded public lands across the state. Success for 30 by 30 looking like 40 by 30. That everyone has access to a thriving green space within walking distance. That we're surrounded by functioning, healthy areas. That 30 by 30 is realized. That there's more protected lands, less urban sprawl, more community greening. That the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument is expanded. Success looking like better health outcomes. That plants and animals can safely move between protected lands and wildlife corridors. Success in the region and at the project level looking like farmed lands to do biodiversity by organic agriculture. Inspiration for 50 by 50, the lowering of temperatures with the removal of concrete, the implementation of green spaces and a lower carbon footprint, updated local coastal programs that include sea level rise, implementation in all caps. A better balance between development and nature. Success for 30 by 30 looking like public support for protecting and conserving natural local ecosystems. So there's an increased amount of protected land and green spaces. Success looking like the new establishment of the San Gabriel National Scenic Area. People caring enough to cut way back on water, oil, and energy. That residents and organizations are fully engaged. That the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area is expanded. There's a healthy, livable, equitable, and sustainable LA for all Angelenos. There's success stories that demonstrate the validity of the concept and supports further work. Access is increased to all people of the region while improving ecosystem health. That new developments, including greening aspects and open space. An effective roadmap and an equitable process is established for 50 by 50. That there's a clear and meaningful definition of conservation. For our phone call-in user, I'm going to unmute you here, 7056. I'll unmute you here. What does success look like for 30 by 30? So the question is, what does success look like for 30 by 30? You are unmuted.
Thanks. Success is if water still flows from Mount Pinos, Reyes Peak, and Pine Mountain. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Healthy, what does success look like for 30 by 30? As I saw healthy soils come through, removing grazing of cattle and sheep. Ecosystem health is integral to our own health, but there's an awareness of the recreation economy. Addressing environmental justice and park inequities through a few programs and initiatives. That you can access a multitude of trails and public lands through public transit. Urban LA lands are restored, oil fields become native plant nurseries. There's wildlife crossings constructed. Designating a clear priority for increased urban land acquisition. Transportation trails that take urban and local residents to the San Gabriel Mountains. Looking at the distribution of 30 by 30 in urban areas. That beavers are reestablished in all watersheds. Success for 30 by 30 looks like wildlife corridors in urban areas. That experiences in nature are valued by residents. That the education of elected officials happens. Not having to go to the San Gabriel Mountains to see and experience nature. The number of urban Black, Indigenous, people of color and conservation jobs is exponentially increased. Ending of all hunting in the state of California. All right. Give us another 30 seconds or so on this question. We're covering waterfowls or urban lakes and wetlands, the protection of landscape scale habitat linkages that reconnect wildlife populations. All right, so it looks like we are at the end of our time here. I want to thank you all for sharing your ideas and experiences during today's meeting. And as a reminder, if you sent in any responses through Poll Everywhere, they are captured. We have them. We're so glad for the rich and robust engagement that's so specific to this region as well. This workshop is recorded. It will be available online at www.californianature.ca.gov. We'll be posting meeting summaries online with non-attributable comments captured during these meetings. And you can provide feedback on today's experience by completing a post-workshop evaluation that will be emailed to you. We invite you to stay connected by visiting our website at www.californianature.ca.gov. You can provide additional written comments through the public input questionnaire and sign up to attend one of our future events as well. And in the chat box, there's also more opportunities for you to provide input. You can email, you can write a letter, you can leave a voicemail. Those are all in the chat and available on the website as well. I want to thank you all again so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Jen for any final words.
Thanks, Jenna. Thank you, everybody who came and stayed in this great room. And thank you, Jenna, for really good facilitation. I have really appreciated the diversity and depth and richness of the comments. I've said this at every workshop and it continues to be true. LA, you did not disappoint. Each region is very different. And so exactly what we were hoping would happen, we're getting a lot of local flavor, understanding what your challenges and opportunities are. So this has just been incredibly valuable for me. I appreciate you being part of the conversation and look forward to future opportunities to hear from you. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And for folks on the webinar or on the phone, the workshop is now over and the breakout rooms will be ending soon. So you may exit this meeting by clicking on Leave Meeting at the bottom of your screen or the X at the top of the screen. Thank you again so much for joining, and we look forward to your continued input. Thank you.